Well, Craig, first of all, let me say it's lovely to see you again. I know we did one of these podcasts. I don't know if you remember it because you were a big deal. I was a little deal back in 2007. And then we bumped into each other at events, I think South by Southwest, maybe once or twice. But thank you for taking the time to join us on the podcast today.
It's my pleasure. And please assume I never remember anything.
Yeah, so that's totally fine. And again, this is 2007, and you were a busy man back then. You're a busy man now. And I'm excited about what you're doing now. And we will get into that in a minute. But I do want to go back because I'm not sure everyone knows this story. Pretty much everyone in at least the United States and maybe the world has heard of this thing called Craigslist. Can we travel back to 1995 when it first got its origins and talk about this thing that you built on a list server? A lot of people listening, the younger folks probably won't even know what that is. And you lobbied to call it SF-events or San Francisco events. You got overruled. It was named in your honor. Let's talk a little bit about that origin story.
Yeah, basically early 95, a lot of people had helped me out through the internet, helping me with learning about San Francisco. And I figured it was time for me to give back. So I did that. Simple mailing list, which worked great for a few months or so. But at about 240 email addresses, the CC list started breaking. How to use a listserv, how to give the thing a name. And since I'm a nerd, I'm very literal. I wanted to call it San Francisco events, since it was still mostly events. People around me, most specifically an Anthony Batt, told me they already called it Craigslist. I had inadvertently created a brand. Anthony and others explained to me what a brand is. He was right. And so I stuck with it.
Well, I think it was probably a good decision because, again, it's become somewhat ubiquitous and still to this day, one of my favorite sites. I've been using it probably for 20-ish years and have given away a ton of things, have sold and bought. So thank you for putting that gift into the world. Before going to Craigslist, and I think this is what you were alluding to because you were a longtime technologist, you worked at a company called IBM for 17 years and then Charles Schwab after that. Let's talk a little bit about what those experiences sort of taught you in life. And I know in some of your interviews, you've talked about the life lessons, and good managers was one of the things you alluded to, but I would love to get your take on those experiences.
Fundamentally, the lessons I learned were about treating people like I want to be treated and not being a jerk, not showing off anything that I might know, and look for social cues. I mean, since in the last 30 years I have learned something about social skills, something about social cues, and that's really helped me out. At least nowadays I can fake having social skills. I really still am a nerd, but I think I'm no longer a jerk. And now I do spend some time agonizing over being reasonably sensitive to other people. The problem I have that I have to remember all the time is that if for whatever reason I'm targeted by people who are running a scam of any sort, I have to remember that I'm no match for someone who lies for a living, and I always need to get help. The first act in my case is not engaging with someone who's a pro, because they will always be better at it than I am.
Well, it's good advice. And I will say, I knew you enough to be dangerous back in 2007. I don't think you were, that maybe you're alluding to before that. I didn't ever feel like you were a jerk. You were a little punchy at times, publicly, just to people that were, you didn't suffer fools. And I would say, because I'm connected to you on Threads, which I actually love, your persona on Threads, you share a lot of your bird watching pictures and you're funny. And so I love where you are. And obviously, and we'll get to this, you're doing some amazing good. Before we get there, I want to go to a couple more things. And one of which was a bit of an unorthodox move, but I think it perfectly sums up who you are. This is 2000. You're running the company, Craigslist. You hand the reins over to your CTO, I believe your CTO at the time, Jim Buckmaster, and you moved into a customer service role. Now, it's not unusual for a founder to eventually give way to a more seasoned CEO or leader, but the fact that you moved into this customer service role, which I think you alluded to it, that you like to help people, was a little bit unique. So what made you go that direction? And, was that well received by the company?
I think towards the end of 99, people helped me understand that as a manager, I suck. And I realized I wasn't really good at the toughest parts, like hiring and firing. And it took a little while for this to sink in, but fortunately I had hired Jim already as a CTO and realized he would be better at tough decisions than I would. So I stepped down fully out of management. After that point, I had no management involvement or even real influence because I promised Jim I would leave him alone to do stuff. That's worked out really well. And that's the gist of things. People seem to be relieved because they saw I was having a tough time in some areas. And people saw that I was relatively egoless about it. On the other hand, I'm also a great customer service rep. And that's a rare thing. I mean, as a programmer, I was really good, but we hired a bunch of people who were better than I was. So I stepped out of programming. I stepped out of management completely. And again, I'm a great customer service rep. I might mention that I retired about 7 years ago, but I actually take a pretty serious customer service attitude towards my philanthropy.
Well, that is very clear. And again, I'm excited to talk about that. Before we jump in there, I do want to get into the fact that you're a voracious reader. In one of the articles that you did, or one of the interviews you did, you talked about your passion for books. So was this something that you've had your entire life, this passion, and which 2 or 3 books really lit you up this year, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah, I've been a pretty intense reader with a big focus on science fiction since I was about 8 or so. So that was 64 years ago. I do read maybe about 80 books a year. I haven't
pretty good.
computed an average. And in terms of what books really excited me, hard to say because I read them so much one after the other. It is difficult to say, and they all kind of blur together, I'm afraid, which is personally disappointing. I really do like the books which make the transition from the written word to TV well. Mm-hmm. So I'm really enjoying Silo, Murderbot, and Foundation, even though the Foundation TV series is inspired by the books, but doesn't follow them that closely.
Well, those are good examples, and I wasn't sure how much TV you watch these days. I do wonder, and I'm not giving you advice here, but if there was a world where after you read a book, you did like a quick, 3-minute summation, like audio summation, and just posted them on your threads, and that way, 1, you'd have a record, and 2, you could be like, that was one of my favorites, didn't like it, loved it, whatever it is. So just a thought.
I like the idea of it. It would be a creative exercise and more pressure on me. And right now, the pressure on me has to do with 2 really big cybersecurity related proposals, one of which looks really good, and the other might be really good, but it was expressed in a way that, let's say, it needs a lot of work.
I'm sure you get a lot of those. And I had another question I want to ask you, but since you've transitioned, I do want to get into your philanthropy. So in 2016, I believe, you started something called Craig Newmark Philanthropies. It's, again, who you are. It's like no frills, good, clean UX like you did with the Craigslist website. People know that it's associated with you. So to date, you've donated or pledged over $400 million, at least from what I can ascertain, to a variety of charities and philanthropies. Tell us a little bit more about this organization and share what inspired you to create this amazing thing.
Okay. Towards the end of my Craigslist years, let's say over the last 10 years or so, I realized that my team didn't need me anymore, but that I could do some real good in philanthropy. So I started transitioning, and after I retired 7 years ago, I went into full-time philanthropy. I'm focusing in areas where I can do some good, which may be neglected otherwise, particularly cybersecurity, particularly support for military families and vets. And so that's where I focused. Since I'm an amateur in philanthropy, I decided the approach that worked for me in general is to build networks of networks. I've been working on that pretty intensely, and that succeeded with me. So far, I've written checks to the amount of guessing around 450 million, and my total commitment is more like 900 million, because I've put all of my Craigslist equity into a what they call a 501c4. I did that just before turning 70. And so I've pretty much given away all my money, for sure, all my income generation. And that's working out pretty well for me, because I realized, there's limitations in terms of how much money I really want.
Well, you are, amen to you, Craig. And first of all, you look great for 70. I would have guessed much younger than that. So you're doing something right. And I do want to dig into that because you do cover a wide variety. And there's one in particular that I do want to talk about after this. But you have military families and veterans. You mentioned cybersecurity. One you didn't touch too much on, which I think is probably more important now than ever. And our friend, I think mutual friend John Battelle, and I were talking about this and what good you're doing. But this is journalism and disinformation. Can we talk about that and why that's such a passion area of yours to contribute to making sure that we keep our, what is a very dirty sort of like journalistic environment right now, cleaner than maybe it should be, or that it could be?
Yeah. My history in this regards, Sunday school, I learned about the ninth commandment, usually translated as thou shalt not lie, although it actually prohibits false witness. And then I had a great high school civics and history class where I learned what the founding fathers said. The way I articulate it is saying that a trustworthy press is the immune system of democracy. Most of my efforts, frankly, haven't been as effective as I'd like them to be. The ones which have proven to be effective, in particular, is the journalism school at the City University of New York and Wikipedia. CUNY is this is the City University of New York. They've been up and running for going on 200 years. And what they've always been about is providing opportunity for people who never got much of one. And that kind of thing applies to me personally, although I went to a different school. Wikipedia is the biggest single thing on the internet when it comes to the future of our species. Wikipedia is where facts go to live, and the connection to science fiction, Wikipedia is kind of the Encyclopedia Galactica that they talked about in the books, but not at all in the TV series, because there's really no way it's a televised thing. And so I could have done a lot better in journalism, but I was in way over my head. But between Wikipedia and the CUNY Journalism School, those are really big deals.
Well, they definitely are. And, again, you're doing amazing things by supporting them and helping to steer. And I'll say, isn't it funny that Wikipedia, let's say 10 years ago, people used to bash it because it's like people would just believe anything on Wikipedia. I think it's become this sort of standard bearer now because it's such a tight community that manages it and makes sure that it's sourced correctly. And I've seen people go in and change something, and literally within minutes, it's re-updated to where it was before because they're so thorough about doing that. And sorry, you were about to say something.
Yeah. Well, Wikipedia is about as close to perfect as humans can make it. Needs improvement, but everything needs improvement.
Well said. I did want to get into one of your, two more things. One, I know that one of your interviews, I saw that you're ramping up your efforts around giving to women in technology, which I think is a critically important, probably equally critically important to this whole misinformation, disinformation piece. Talk about sort of what that piece looks like and what inspired you to start thinking about giving to women in tech.
Well, a Sunday school lesson is also treat people like I want to be treated, which means being fair to everyone. I've done a number of things, but now I'm trying to focus on what's actually doing some good, and that has to do with helping everyone out, particularly training women in cybersecurity. For example, there's Girls Who Code, and the folks there, in fact, coordinate all my activities supporting cybersecurity training at the K through 12 level. Another party which complements that is the Gina Davis Institute. Their big focus is on, when it comes to movies and TVs, showing women doing roles, particularly in STEM and cybersecurity, which are kind of non-traditional. And this is a really big deal, and I'm trying to do what I can, but I know when I'm in over my head, and I defer things to the people who really are good at this stuff.
Well, I love the fact that you have such self-awareness, because I think a lot of us don't have that self-awareness of, look, I know there are people that do this far better than me. And a little plug, sounds like, I think Tarika Barrett is the CEO of Girls Who Code. We would love to have Tarika on the show at some point in time if you ever want to steer her in this direction, because we are focusing on people that are influential, that are doing societal good. You're obviously doing a lot of that. She's doing a lot of that as well. So the next question I want to ask, which is a little bit of an interesting one, but I think now that I follow you on Threads and I know more about your bird watching, I heard that one of your philanthropic activities is rescuing pigeons. So are those two things related at all, or how did this come to be?
For reasons I don't understand, I love birds. I also have a sense of humor. It's very dry, very understated. And I figured, well, I can help rescue pigeons. Pigeons are survivors. They may be our replacement species. No one knows. But I figure I could help out, and that feels really good.
Well, that is good of you. And obviously you cover a lot of different, a lot of territory, and I'm impressed by the breadth of it. I do like to give guests an opportunity to let listeners know where they can find you. And I assume one of the places you'd probably like to send them is to your Craig Newmark Philanthropies, which is craignewmarkphilanthropies.org, just like it says. Any other places you'd like them to come and connect with you, or other things where you'd like them to support and engage?
Well, I'm trying to run programs which engage the entire country, everyone, in protection regarding cyber warfare, cyber attacks, and also online scams. We're still working on it, but I'd appreciate it if everyone can take a look at pausetake9.org. That's pausetake9.org, spelled like it sounds.
Okay, well, we'll include that in the show notes, as well as the link to your philanthropic page, because I like people to be able to find these things easily. And because we have a few more minutes, I think we've got 10, I'll get into my rapid fire questions in just a second. But one I do want to ask you, because I think a lot of people that know the history of technology, and particularly the World Wide Web, would credit you as being one of the backbones, one of the pillars of sort of building technology and what we know today. You know, obviously we have the Metas and the Amazons or whatever. Craigslist was, like Wikipedia, one of the positive forces. My question is, because you've worked in technology well before the internet ever became a thing, what has impressed you and depressed you the most over the years?
The existence and strength of the internet has always impressed me in a big way. I know a certain amount about the engineering underpinning it. What's possibly depressed me is how people abuse each other on the internet.
And any advice for that? Again, I love how you show up in the places you show up, and you feel, you mentioned it, you have that very subtle sense of humor. You do share your beautiful pictures of birds. You will sort of poke people, but like not in a, you'll do it in a loving way. So any advice to folks that could use some encouragement or maybe need a little bit of guidance in terms of how we can treat each other better online?
Don't feed the trolls.
That's a
If
good one.
someone is being unpleasant, they're probably just trying to get attention, engagement. Don't help them.
Is a very good one. And I would also say not everyone's religious, but you mentioned Sunday school and you shared a few like really good truisms, I think. And I grew up in, a pretty religious family, much more spiritual now. And I think just remembering some of those truisms, right, that we maybe learned back in the day. So I do want to get to the fun questions, or the ones that help get to know you a little bit better. So one of the ones that I loved is in an interview with Janet Riley of the Nob Hill Gazette. So, talk about supporting your local papers. You mentioned that other than reading and bird watching and spending time with Mrs. Newmark, you like to watch TV. So which show are you currently in love with? I know you mentioned a couple of them, Murderbot and Foundation, and I'm blanking on the other one, Silos, right? Because which I loved. But anything else that you're watching right now that you love?
Okay. There's Murderbot, For All Mankind, and maybe a big favorite is Alien Earth. They're doing a great job. And like so many other people, I'm a big fan of the Eye Monster, although I don't think it's the Baby Yoda of the show.
Well, clearly you're a science fiction aficionado, which I love, and thank you for sharing that. This is another one I always like to figure out because it speaks to, who speaks to you. And so I know you've had a chance to meet some amazing people, famous people over the course of your life. Who has impressed you the most?
I guess it's Leonard Cohen, even if I met him only for a moment. He's my rabbi. I've met other people, but sometimes it all just comes and goes too quickly. I still want to meet David Letterman, who has affected me in a number of ways, particularly my sense of humor.
Well, I think given who you are, feels like you would be a good candidate to connect with them. So if there's ever anything I can do to make that thing happen, I will absolutely do that. All right. 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up and get you on to your next event. What is your biggest regret?
My biggest regret is not asking for help, being a lot smarter when some bad actors attacked us for a very good law enforcement program we were running at Craigslist.
Yes, I can imagine that. And I remember because obviously your ads section became a popular place for people to do some things. And obviously you are a do-gooder and you're just trying to help out. So I can totally see why that would have been saddening. Last one, and this is one that I've asked everyone. I had on the show earlier today, it's dropping later, but Chuck Leavell, who's the keyboardist for the Rolling Stones. So this was an interesting one to ask him. But name a band or artist that you wish you had seen in concert, ideally one that's not touring anymore or that isn't with us.
Well, that's back to Leonard Cohen. I did see him a couple times, but I'd like to see more. But he passed in 2016.
Yeah, he definitely left a thumbprint on the music industry, and I would encourage anyone that has not listened to his music before to go and check it out. So with that, we will wrap up and give you a couple minutes to get ready for your next thing. Craig, I really appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate all of the good that you're doing in the world. The fact that you're giving away your entire sort of, set of wealth is just unbelievable. So, I bless you for doing what you're doing.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Have a great rest of your day. And if you just give me a second, I will stop and we can wrap up and let this upload.